fighting to avoid a first-ever federal default. Joining us, Republican representative from Tennessee, Marsha Blackburn, and Democratic representative from New York, Greg Meeks, friend of the show. Great to see you both. Congresswoman, I'll start with you. Where are you on this? Does it absolutely have to be done first, even if there's no agreement on spending, or could we deal with a week or 2 weeks of a technical default to really get something good long term?
I think what Republicans have said from the get-go is many are like me, a no vote on a straight debt increase without having any defining parameters around that, making certain that you have spending caps in place, doing some serious spending cutting, which is what the American people want to see, and a balanced budget amendment. You've got to be able to end this culture of tax and spend, and you have to be able to put some provisions in place that would be there to build, kind of build a fence around all the spending.
Stan Druckenmiller notwithstanding, even it's almost on both sides of the aisle saying don't play around with this, with the full faith and credit of the U.S. government. I mean, we've got Geithner saying, I don't know, what was worse? What was going to happen on Saturday at 6 p.m. or what Geithner is saying is going to happen if we don't? Geithner was worse than...
Jamie Dimon made comments on Friday, too, in Colorado.
And you know, he doesn't want to...
push things off of a cliff.
So and what you want to do, you know you have to be responsible with this, and indeed Congress will, and I think we're
But is that an empty threat then? I mean, if you know you have to be responsible and you don't want to mess around with this, we want this to happen.
No, you don't want to mess around with it.
So you would, I guess my point is, would you go ahead and let the debt ceiling stay where it is, or if push comes to shove, you want these spending cuts to come through, but what's more important, the spending cuts or the debt ceiling?
What you have to do is use this. We've got one opportunity to end this out-of-control federal spending and to get this budget under control. And what we have to say is, look, do we want to deal with this now, or do we want our children and grandchildren dealing with the crisis later? We know there is a debt crisis. It is right in front of us. So are we going to handle it, endure the pain now, or are we going to push it off and have our children and grandchildren? I think we need to put it on the table and get busy with dealing with it.
Congressman Meeks, well, I'm tossing you. I'm just looking down. It's flashing Greek debt, Greek debt. That just happens to be some of the news we're seeing today. Every time I look down, I've got a little, like an alert to check out the story on Greek debt. Do we just raise it and not worry about the future?
No, we have to be responsible. And, you know, Republican presidents, Democratic presidents, Republican presidents, Reagan and Bush, former Secretary Baker, they all say playing with the debt ceiling is like playing with America's full faith and credibility. This is not an issue that you play around with. Our whole credibility, there's too much at stake in that regards. Everybody acknowledges that we've got to figure out collectively how we deal with, we got a spending problem and we have a revenue problem. As you look at what has taken place, and I agree, by 2019, you know, you'll see that 50% of our overall debt are two wars, which we might get out of, and that will help us, and the Bush area tax cuts. So we've got to figure out how we do that, as well as the spending. We know that we've got some hard work to do, and I think the Democrats are ready and willing to sit down on that hard work, but we don't want to play with the issue of the full faith and credibility of the American economy that could devastate us and we're to the point where we could never return. And I think that this is an issue that you don't play politics with. There's certain things that you can afford to play politics with, but playing with the full faith and credibility of the United States of America is not one of those issues.
We are borrowing 42 cents of every dollar we spend. That has to stop. We do have a spending problem. What we have to make certain is that we stop this spending $1.2 billion a day to pay the interest on our debt. We have to get that under control. This is an opportunity that we have. We need to be responsible in dealing with the situation. Certainly, we don't want to take steps that will end up costing the taxpayer more, lowering our rating, increasing the interest that we're paying. But we cannot continue to spend in the manner that we have spent.
You know, we've got to look at cuts. But we also got to
We have
look
a
at how we
spending
can do
problem.
at revenue also.
How
There's
far
two
are you two
ways.
apart in terms of the cuts? You're both
debts.
saying that you need to cut spending. How far apart are you two in terms of where you think spending cuts should come?
Well, I think that what we need to do is to sit down and have a real debate about it, but not try to hold the country hostage as we did with the debt ceiling.
We're not.
But is
We've
that a
been
way of saying
trying.
that you don't want to deal with this between now and August 2nd, Congressman?
No, I'm saying that we should have a conversation, but what's happening right now is what I heard the speaker say is that there will be no conversation about the debt ceiling unless we have this in it, and we only will talk about cuts. We're not going to talk about revenue. That revenue, in other words, they're trying to say is our way or the highway, or otherwise we're going to try to shut this country down. That's
Becky,
not responsible.
we know that the economy cannot stand tax increases. We all know that it has been 754 days as of today since the Democrats have put a credible budget and spending plan out there for debate. We are overspent. The American people are overtaxed. American business is overtaxed. We do not have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem. We need to address our discretionary, which on the 2010 spending levels was $1.38 trillion. We need to address the mandatory. We have the $2.6 trillion there. It's time to put it on the table and take care of this.
Cuts, we were in the greatest economic times of our lives. We have the Bush tax cuts, and clearly we can go back to it. There need to be some revenue as well as cuts, and we can balance it. We're not balancing a budget just on the backs of the middle class and the poor.
All right, Congress people. Thank you, Congresswoman Blackburn. And Congressman Meeks, thank you. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Okay.